what were they like? Were they healthier or were they not healthier? And they found that, guess what? Milo is an awesome drink for kids. Well, Dr. Ludwig, who's one of the leading scientists in obesity and kids, said there were many flaws in the study, including the type of design, lots of co-founding, low participation rate, the relying on recall of 10-year-old kids for diet. They had less screen time if they drank Milo, and they had more activity because they saw these little kids on the thing kicking the ball, so maybe they were athletes and they wanted to become more athletic, sort of like athletes drinking Gatorade. My son used to play basketball, and he was watching all the professional athletes on the commercials drinking Gatorade, so he thought he should drink Gatorade in order to be a great athlete. So maybe he was exercising more, and it didn't adjust for screen time or activity. So there's a lot of flaws with this stuff. Now this is fascinating. Other ways that food industry is influencing. This is Rona Applebaum. She was the vice president of Coke. She was the head of chief science officer. And they created something called the Global Energy Balance Network. Has anybody heard of that? Well, essentially, if you get the title, it's basically the idea that all calories are the same. So 1,000 calories of Coke is the same as 1,000 calories of broccoli, and you'll be fine as long as you don't exceed your calorie requirement. You won't lose or gain weight. Now, anybody just hearing that knows that doesn't make sense. But in fact, it is the policy of our government, of most nutritionists, and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and the American Council on Nutrition. It's also the policy of our dietary guidelines. So this is basically what everybody believes, that all calories are the same. Well, they tried to create this front group, and they created a $20 million endowment. They created the website. They created this network of doctors. They helped develop the website. They actually created the website and funded it, and it was listed under Coca-Cola, but it was supposed to be an independent science group. And they funded these guys like James Hill and others who were involved in doing this research to show that it's all about calories. And what's fascinating is if you look at, from 2008 to 2016, they funded over almost 400 articles in 169 journals, showing that physical activity was more important than diet, and that soft drinks and sugar are harmless. Now, if you have one 20-ounce soda, you have to run 4 miles to burn it off, right? And the average kid has probably 2 a day of those, right? That's the average. There's no way you can outrun a bad diet, right? So this was a problem. And then the New York Times came out with an expose documenting all this, and the next day Rona Applebaum retired. And all these FOIA requests and emails came out, and these guys had to give back money from the University of Colorado. It was a big scandal, and they were exposed for what they were doing. But the average person just wouldn't know, right? Again, looking at artificial sweeteners, there was no harm found in artificial sweeteners from studies done by the food industry. And independently studies found significant harm. I think it's like 99% showed no harm from the industry, and 99% showed harm from independent funding. So it just confuses the literature, and it makes people very confused. I think yesterday there was a review of artificial sweeteners and all the data on this, showing that there was no evidence of benefit and there was some evidence of harm. So they're also, this is just Coca-Cola, I'm just singling out Coke, but a lot of other food players are doing the same thing, right? From 2010 to 2015, they funded $21 million in research. They funded $98 million in, quote, community partnerships, like funding the obesity hospital at the obesity center at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. They gave $700,000 to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They gave $3.5 million to the American Academy of Family Practice. There was actually a riot about that. The family docs protested, and they had to withdraw. American Academy of Pediatrics. Why is Coca-Cola giving $3 million to Academy of Pediatrics? Because they want to influence what they're doing. This woman was our director of the CDC in this current administration. There were FOIA requests and uncovered emails from her collaborating with Coca-Cola officials, and also the CDC got $1 million from Coke to promote exercise programs. Not to change diet, but to promote exercise programs. She resigned once this was found out, right? Now this guy is fascinating. Fred Stair was the founder of the Harvard Nutrition Department, the first Department of Nutrition and Academic Center in the 50s. He was a leading voice in nutrition, received almost $30 million in donations over the course of his career, which was over the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's a lot of money, mostly from the food industry. The sugar industry funded 30 studies that he did between 1952 and 56. And this paper came out in the JAMA Internal Medicine 2016, linking him to this paper that was published, and also Mark Hegsted, who was the guy who was responsible under the McGovern report for the first dietary guidelines in the United States. They both wrote this paper. They were given the equivalent of $50,000 by the sugar industry to say that sugar was not a problem and that fat was the enemy, which led to, and this was in the New England Journal of Medicine, by the way. This wasn't a second-rate journal, widely read and influenced the next 4 or 5 decades of nutrition policy. So this is a big issue, and they were highly corrupted, and he also was the co-founder of a group called the American Council on Science and Nutrition, which sounds like a stand-up group of scientists promoting science and nutrition. Well, it turns out that this group is actively promoting the fact that pesticides are benign, that smoking doesn't harm you, that trans fats are safe, that artificial sweeteners are good for your health, and that global warming is a hoax. And they are funded by, you guess who? The usual cast of characters, right? Monsanto, Bayer now, Kellogg's, Coke, McDonald's, Philip Morris. I think Bayer's probably regretting that they bought Monsanto because there was a lawsuit. This guy Gardner got lymphoma. It was like $280 million or something. They reduced it to $80 million. But it was a pretty profound blow, and there literally are billions of dollars of other suits pending against Monsanto. What about the British Journal Medical Journal, the BMJ? I think a stand-up journal. I love reading it. They have great papers. But there was an investigation of studies on Gatorade from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. Sounds pretty official. They found that less than 3% of the studies that had been published about Gatorade were valid, and they had major flaws. And they were done by scientists who are on the payroll of Pepsi. Like, this is the kind of stuff that's going on all the time. So you read, oh, Gatorade's good for you. Well, maybe not. Misconduct in science. You're completely free to carry whatever research you want so long as you come to these conclusions. And they are heavily involved. You know, I once had dinner with my cousin and her husband, and I'd never met him before. And I said, so what do you do? He says, well, I work for a CRO. I'm like, what's that? He says, that's a contract research organization. I'm like, oh, what do you guys do? He says, well, we get funded by pharma to design studies, to find reputable academic researchers, help them do the study. We write up the study. We then get them to sign off on it, and then we publish it. I'm like, okay, something wrong with that. Now, there's other stuff they're doing. For example, Fifth Quarter was a chocolate milk, which has 10 teaspoons of sugar. And it was promoted as a drink that's going to protect kids who play football from concussion, right? After the fourth quarter, you have the fifth quarter, which is chocolate milk. And turns out there was no date on this. And the scientists got called out who were involved in this. And University of Maryland had to return $230,000 that was given to them by this company. So this is just rampant. We like to pay some scientists to sing in perfect harmony and help us dupe the world that Coke doesn't cause obesity. It's a surreal thing, right? This is actually more prevalent than we think. Okay, so that was bad news there. And we're going to get to the good news. We can do something about this. Not only are they affecting nutrition science, but they're affecting, this is a time warp. I had 40 minutes, and now I ran that down. Now I have 50 minutes, which is pretty awesome. Okay. I'll leave time for questions. Infiltration of nutrition education and co-opting of professional societies. So it's not just the doing of the science, it's affecting everybody who's talking about the science. So they get us from all ends, right? And now a word from our sponsors. Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Michelle Simon, Are Americans nutrition professionals in the pocket of big food? Coca-Cola bragged that they trained 300